Hey guys, EB here, and welcome to my second unscripted thoughts video where I talk about a movie that I recently just saw. And the movie I'm going to be talking about today is Inglourious Basterds by Quentin Tarantino. Before I truly begin, I just want to let everybody know there are going to be spoilers in this video. I will not hold back in my discussion of the movie, so anyone who hasn't seen Inglourious Basterds yet and plans on doing so, I do not recommend you watch this video. For everyone else who either has already seen the movie or doesn't care about spoilers, please enjoy. So, Inglourious Basterds follows a group of American soldiers who are called the Bastards, and they spend their time going after Nazis in World War II. And they plan to invade a cinema during the premiere of a new Nazi propaganda film, where they plan on assassinating as many Nazis as possible, including the Alpha Adolf Hitler himself. At the same time, the owner of the cinema is planning on sabotaging the premiere to avenge her Jewish family, who was executed by the Nazis a few years prior. Now, before I really dissect the movie, I want to give my background on other Tarantino movies that I've seen. I've only seen two other Tarantino movies, those being Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. And if I were to rank all the Quentin Tarantino movies that I've seen so far, weakest to strongest, it would go Inglourious Basterds, Reservoir Dogs, and Pulp Fiction. Inglourious Basterds is my least favorite Tarantino film, but only by default, because it is far from a bad movie. With that said, I also want to talk about the title of the movie because it is misspelled. It's done on purpose, but Tarantino has not explained why it was misspelled on purpose. I'm pretty sure the second I in Inglorious is not supposed to be there. Don't quote me on that because I might be wrong, but I do know for a fact that Bastards is not spelt with an E. As to why the title is misspelled, I have read this interesting theory online, which says the reason is because Inglourious Basterds doesn't really follow the history books 100% accurately. It changes up things a lot, obviously. I'll get more into that later, but for the time being, all I can really say is that the misspelling of the titles is to help subtly hint that there are going to be differences and changes in this movie from the norm. I'm paraphrasing the theory, of course, but that's basically what I've read. I'll try to find a link to where I found it in the description if I have the time, but now that I got that out of the way, let's talk about the things that I quote-unquote didn't like. And I use the term didn't like loosely because I don't think the saying I didn't like these things isn't really the best way to put it, if that makes any sense. Like, it's not that I hate these things in the movie, it's just that I guess objectively looking at it, these are things that technically count as problems, but I don't necessarily really hate these things about the movie. The first thing I want to talk about is the narrator. Now, the narrator comes in two times in the film. The first time he's giving the background story to one of the bastards. I can't remember his name. Basically, his story is that he was a German, but he started killing his own people and was about to be executed for it, but the bastards got to him before the 11th hour and took him in as one of their own. The second time the narrator comes in, he's explaining that back in the 1940s, film was more flammable. In fact, they say in the movie that the material that film was made out of in those days burned 3 times faster than paper. The reason why they give that information is because the theater owner plans on using film to burn down the cinema during the premiere. So I guess that, yes, it would be important for the audience to know that the material that film was made out of back then was highly flammable. But even then, one could argue that Tarantino could have just found a creative way to squeeze that into dialogue. He does dialogue really well, so he could have found a way to squeeze it in there, honestly. So I guess the narrator isn't really necessary. He only comes in at 2 times in the film, and honestly, you could have cut him out and everything would have been fine. As for the first time the narrator comes in, when he's giving the background story to one of the bastards, I just have to ask, why is it that we're getting his background story and not the background story of the rest of the bastards? What makes this character particularly special is what I want to know. So I felt the narrator was pointless. It's not something that bugs me too much. It's not like I absolutely hate the existence of the narrator. It's not like I hate the fact that there is a narrator. It's just that I feel that the use of the narrator is kind of pointless. It's more disappointing than anything. Another thing I want to talk about is camera work. This is another example where me saying I don't like this fits loosely, because in all honesty, the camera work in Inglourious Basterds is not bad by any stretch of the imagination. But the reason why I'm talking about it here is because when you compare the camera work in Inglourious Basterds to the camera work in Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, the camera work in Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction is a million times better than the camera work in Inglourious Basterds. Again, the camera work in this movie is good, but it doesn't really hold a candle to the camera work in the other two Tarantino movies that I've seen. And some people might say that it's not fair to compare and contrast in that way, but seeing as how all of the films I'm talking about were directed by the same guy, it does kind of give me the right to compare and contrast. So all I can really say is that while the camera work isn't bad by any means, there definitely has been better camera work in past Tarantino projects before. Other than that, that's really all that I have to say for the stuff that I quote-unquote didn't like. That's why I started with the things that I quote-unquote didn't like first, because it's a lot shorter. So now let's get onto things I did like. First thing that I have written down right here in my notes is I'm going to butcher this name. It's a French name, so I'm going to butcher it. Let me see if I can try my best. Shoshana, the Jewish French cinema owner. I'm pretty sure I did butcher her name. So I'm just going to call her cinema owner from now on, because I'm not going to try to pronounce her name again. She's probably my favorite character in the film, and the reason for that is because if you watch her, there are scenes where she's obviously weak and vulnerable, but she does a damn good job at hiding it. Like, when she comes, like, there's a scene where she's in a restaurant, and she meets one of the Nazis who killed her family a few years before, but the Nazi doesn't recognize her. And she's playing it cool, she's not trying to act suspicious or anything, she's pretending like that she's just having a casual conversation with this guy. And when they're done and he leaves, she just starts having an emotional breakdown. Like, she's just like, she was putting on this facade, and like, it really got to her, obviously. And then later in the film, when she's about to burn down the cinema, someone came into the projector room. She tricks that someone into locking the door and shoots him in the back, but as she shoots this guy in the back, she looks away, as in a sense to not really see the bloody mess that she would make from shooting this guy. And that's what I like about her character. She's probably the most flawed out of all of them. Yeah, she definitely is cold in a lot of ways, but she still has vulnerability. She still has weakness to her. That's what I'm going to say, because I'm not going to try to pronounce the other word. I cannot pronounce words today, yay! So that's why I like her character so much, because she's probably the most human out of everyone in the film. That's not to say that the rest of the characters are poorly written, it's just that out of all of them, she feels the most human. Another good character is Frederick, who is the star of the Nazi film. That might be an odd choice to pick up on, but I do like his character. I do feel like he's well written. I like the scene where earlier when I was talking about the guy going up to the projector when he wasn't supposed to, Frederick is the one who does that, and because he's the star of the movie, he goes up there and he goes to the cinema owner And he jokingly says to her, "Are you the owner of the cinema? I want a refund. This movie sucks. The main actor is terrible." It's not a huge laugh or anything, but it is a nice, good bit. It's good character writing, essentially, is what it is. And that's one of the best things about this movie is the character writing is pretty good, with the cinema owner being the best example. Hans Landa, the Jew hunter, as they call him in the movie, he's a really good villain. You know, he's not really how you would think of most villains, honestly. Like, he's a lot more happier and optimistic than he has any right to be, but somehow they make it work, which is strange. Like, the actor is great, the writing is great, it's a really good character, and it's a really good performance, and I feel like he's a really good villain. I could go through and talk about the other characters, like I think I can't remember his name, but he's played by Brad Pitt. He's another really good character, the one with the heavy American accent. There's that really funny scene where he's pretending to be Italian, trying to speak Italian, but it's not very convincing because he has such a thick American accent. It's a really funny scene. My favorite part of the movie is when they finally burn down the cinema. It's suspenseful, it's kind of creepy, but satisfying. It's like tons of emotions all packed into one. Like, it's a really well done scene, honestly, and the way that the cinema owner kind of hijacks the film and puts her own footage into the reel before she burns everything down, it's awesome. This is kind of off topic, but I wanted to talk about it briefly because it was dumb. Shut up, baseball fans! I was watching a clip on YouTube of them burning down the cinema, and I was reading the comments, and there was some stupid person in the comment section who said something like, "This is such a bad scene because they're just blindly murdering a bunch of people and it drags you down to the Nazis' level." Like, to the person who wrote that comment, calm down, okay? It's just a movie. No one was actually killed. It's just a piece of fiction. You don't need to bring this whole huge moral debacle into it. It's just a movie, okay? If it was an actual historical event that took place and people actually did die, maybe you may have a point. But it's just a movie, okay? There's no need to be like this, dude. Just calm down, alright? The comment section in that video that I saw was mostly positive, with most people were saying how satisfying it is to see Hitler get shot by a machine gun, which it is, because he deserved it. But there's some stupid people in the comments, like this guy that I just talked about, and then there was this other stupid person who's like, "We should do this to Trump." And I read that, I was just like, no, please don't bring politics into this. Can't we just sit back and enjoy this scene from the movie? Can we not bring the politics in, please? I hate it when people bring politics into places when it's not welcome, okay? Just like, it's so annoying because there are so many times when politics are not welcome and people bring it in. It's just, I can't stand it. But now that tangent's over, let's move on. The next, I want to talk about how this is when Tarantino's style in this film. As far as Tarantino's style goes, this movie is unique in that there's definitely aspects of Tarantino in there, like the Mexican standoff in the bar, them finally burning down the cinema, and the Basterds' goal of collecting 100 Nazi scalps, and the Bear Jew beating a Nazi officer to death with a baseball bat. There are little glimpses here and there. But overall, this movie is unique. It's a lot slower paced than most Tarantino movies. The pacing and the style of it, while there are hints of Tarantino in there, it feels a little bit different, just a little bit, from other movies like Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. Like, if you were told Tarantino directed this movie, you wouldn't have a hard time believing it in any way. It definitely is a different approach for the director, without a shadow of a doubt. That's probably one of the reasons why this is my least favorite Tarantino movie out of the three that I've seen so far. Because while it definitely is a Tarantino film, it still has a different take on it. Honestly, it's like a different way that Tarantino did it. but it's still pretty good. I briefly talked about how the movie is historically inaccurate before, which it is. The biggest difference, I think, that almost anyone can pick up on, Hitler was not killed in a theater. He committed suicide in a bunker. But honestly, I don't think it really matters. As for how much of the film is historically inaccurate, I'm not sure. I don't know if the film Nation's Pride, I think I said that wrong, but what I tried to say is Nation's Pride. I don't know if Nation's Pride ever existed. I don't know if the director of that film ever existed either. I know that there was a German film made at the time that glorified the Nazis' mission, but I'm not sure as to if there are other movies out there like that, if the film industry in Germany was so influenced by the Nazi power or not. I have no excuse to not know how historically accurate this movie is, because I genuinely enjoy reading up on World War II history, because my grandfather on my dad's side of the family served in World War II. I don't think he had a big job. I think he just worked with flags, but still, more or less, the point I'm trying to get at is, like, I should know how historically accurate this movie is. The only real thing I know is, like, Hitler committed suicide in the bunker, didn't get killed in a cinema. That's the only thing I really know. But to be fair, this movie doesn't really tread over most of the ground that I'm familiar with, so that's probably a part of it. But I still might have to do some reading up. I should have done the reading up earlier before I made this video, but oh well. Something else I want to bring up quickly too. There are some people out there who seem to get annoyed whenever movies are historically inaccurate. One example I can think of, I've seen the movie, but I haven't seen people's reaction to it. Amadeus, from what I can tell, it's not incredibly accurate. Like, its depiction of Mozart wasn't the best, I heard. It's a good movie, but I've heard that's not completely historically accurate. Apparently, people get really upset that movie isn't historically accurate. I think The Simpsons mocked it at one point. But honestly, if you want my opinion, I don't care if a movie is historically accurate or not, unless it's a documentary. Like, if you want historical accuracy, go watch a documentary on the History Channel or National Geographic or something like that. Don't watch a Quentin Tarantino movie. Like, movies made for the purpose of entertainment aren't necessarily the best place for historical accuracy, because a movie's #1 goal is to tell a story. If it can be historically accurate, that's great, but it doesn't need to be. And Inglourious Basterds is a good example of a movie not being historically accurate, but still being pretty good. But that's a rant for a whole nother time. As for the time being, that's basically everything I have to say about Inglourious Basterds. If I were to rate it out of 10, I'd probably give it a 9, because it's a pretty good movie. It has a few flaws here and there, but nothing that really ruins the experience. I would recommend you check it out if you haven't already, especially if you're a fan of Quentin Tarantino or World War II movies in general. It's a really well-made movie, and it's worth your time. Anyways, that's all for me for today, so come by next time. Can't wait to see you there. Until then, EV out.